Just west of the bright yellow George Rogers Clark Bridge is Clarksville, Indiana. A place of immense history and intriguing dark stories. Native Americans once called it the Dark Land and considered it cursed. In fact, many that tried to settle here died of mysterious fevers and were buried along the riverbank, making it a city of the dead. Shawnee warriors considered it their exclusive hunting grounds and would execute anyone who dared step on its banks. But that was a long time ago. Today, it's a place of many things to see and experience if you know where to look. The town, county, and the bridge are all named after Revolutionary War hero, General George Rogers Clark. General Clark established both Clarksville and Fort Clark in 1783, making it the oldest town in the old Northwest Territory. Before that, it was actually part of the British province of Quebec. But without a doubt, the intriguing history starts the moment you set foot in Clarksville. Just a few blocks north of the Ohio River, you'll see the Colgate-Palmolive Clock on 1410 South Clark Boulevard. It's one of the largest clocks ever built and once ranked number 2 in the entire world. With a diameter of 40 feet, it's actually larger than Big Ben in London, which is a mere 22.5 feet. It was built in 1906 and was originally located at Colgate headquarters in New Jersey. It was moved in 1924 to its present site, which was formerly the infamous Indiana State Penitentiary, the largest correctional facility in Indiana. In fact, inmates helped retool the prison into a factory. They stayed in cells that were already there during the transition. However, the large prison, built in 1847, gained a very bad reputation during its early operation. It has an extremely dark history. There was no division of inmates by age or severity of crime. Boys as young as 12 years old, sent to jail for stealing an apple, could be put in the same cell as a middle-aged man serving a life sentence for murder. The food they were given was more appropriate for a dumpster than human consumption. Inmates were forced to work at a foundry furnace that was blistering hot in all seasons and known to all as hell. The entire prison was so inhumane that it was truly hell on earth. Inmates were routinely beaten and even tortured behind the prison walls. No one really knows how many people died here because of these diabolical conditions. The prison closed operations in 1923, but many say that some inmates never left. People have heard voices in the basement and footsteps when they knew they were the only one there. A remnant of the torture, cruelty, and untold number of people that died there. There are relatively few buildings along the Clarksville waterfront, as the Great Flood of 1937 covered the entire town with up to 12 feet of water, destroying about everything. But there is the Widow's Walk, which serves ice cream, coffee, and has a little cafe. Here you have a clear view of Louisville, Kentucky, and abundant wildlife. The Ohio River Greenway continues west to New Albany and east to Jeffersonville. The entire path is 7 miles long and great for walking, jogging, and biking. It's also a place of rich folklore. It was along this waterfront that early residents found ancient skeletons that were over 7 feet tall. These were clearly giants by any standard. It was said that they were so ancient that they quickly disintegrated into dust when exposed to air. Native Americans living in the Ohio River Valley had giant stories for hundreds of years that predated these findings. The waterfront is also where people in the 1800s came to have duels. As it was illegal in Kentucky, people came across the Ohio River to settle their differences. How many people died from duels along the waterfront is unknown. Looking west, you'll see the 14th Street Bridge that was completed in 1870, enabling trains to travel across the Ohio River. The 1800s architecture looks similar to a medieval castle and has portals. Inside, it looks like the abandoned ruins of an ancient place. Below the bridge are a network of locks and dam that control the falls of the Ohio and allow passage of boats. Before the Army Corps of Engineers developed this area, all travelers along the Ohio River had to stop at the falls in what became Louisville. If they wanted to continue west, they had to remove their boats from the water and have them transported below the falls. Thus, many pioneers simply decided to settle and stay here. The falls area is a swirling, chaotic display of water. It's also a death trap if you hear the warning siren and don't leave the fossil beds. The locks open and thousands of gallons of water are released. There's a lot to experience and see in this area, but there is also a lot of unseen history and legends that you can't, including the stranger-than-fiction story of Corn Island. When George Rogers Clark came here in 1778 with 10 boats and up to 20 families, he established a military outpost in the middle of the Ohio River. The island was mapped in 1766 by Thomas Bullitt, who estimated it at 4,000 feet long, 1,000 feet wide, and comprising 70 acres. It was pretty sizable. It was originally called Dunmore Island in honor of John Murray, Crown 4th Earl of Dunmore and Crown Governor of Virginia. It was later renamed Corn Island when settlers planted corn here in 1778. In low water, you could wade to the island from the south, but it was otherwise very well protected by the Ohio River and the raging falls. General Clark's men built a fort and blockhouses. Over time, all the trees were cut down, and this allowed a great deal of erosion. Limestone was quarried from the island and was used for building bridges and foundations for houses in Louisville. This, of course, allowed even more erosion until the island was a mere shadow of its former self. Finally, the Army Corps of Engineers proposed a plan to remove the remaining limestone low enough so ships could pass over it. They blasted the entire island with dynamite until it was all 6 feet below the Ohio River. And now, nothing remains of Corn Island but a large slab of limestone bedrock 6 to 10 feet below the Ohio River. The island of large cornfields and homes has simply vanished from history. But here's a fact stranger than fiction. Even though Corn Island is entirely underwater, the James family in Louisville has owned it for generations and pays taxes on it every single year. Moving further west, along the Ohio River, you'll find a statue of William Clark and Meriwether Lewis. If you were to travel to St. Louis, Missouri, a giant arch commemorates their historic Corps of Discovery expedition that went all the way to the Pacific Ocean. However, it actually started here at Clarksville, Indiana. William Clark was the younger brother of General George Rogers Clark and was living here at the time. In fact, the entire group of brave explorers assembled at General Clark's cabin before they left. This area is actually world-renowned as the largest Devonian-era fossil bed in the world. Geologists say that this fossil bed is over 359 million years old. You can tour these fossil beds at your leisure or take a guided and informative tour. And you can also tour the Falls of the Ohio Museum, which provides a comprehensive history of the falls area. It is fully handicap accessible. And includes an excellent film. You can't really say that you've experienced Clarksville, Indiana, entirely without a trip to the Clark cabin site, also known as Clark's Point. Here is where George Rogers Clark lived after his service in the Revolutionary War. It was here that he also ran a small mill. It is a little hard to find if you've never been here before. Set your GPS to 1021 Harrison Avenue. His cabin on this high ridge allowed him to look east and see Corn Island, where he trained his men, and remember the great mission and glory that he once had, defeating the British on the western frontier. It was because George Rogers Clark and those 10 boats of families that Louisville became a large city. But to the west of this cabin was another island with a past so dark that Native Americans wouldn't even go there. A place called Sand Island. During General Clark's time in Indiana, he explored much of the surrounding southern Indiana wilderness. He also wrote a detailed memoir about his life. While most of his recollections were about his military service, the history of the Falls area, wildlife, and native people he met, others were and are very controversial, starting with Sand Island. Clark met a chief of the Piankeshaw tribe named Tobacco. He told Clark about a race of tall, white Indians, giants, that had yellow hair, blue eyes, and were feared by the other tribes. One day, several tribes banded together as a war party and attacked Sand Island. They killed every last man, woman, and child of the white Indians. Thereafter, Sand Island was considered cursed. Both General Clark and Major John Harrison explored Sand Island and found thousands of skeletons, laying as if killed in some ancient, chaotic battle. Both men recorded this in their memoirs. A skull from Sand Island was taken to Dr. Beckwith for analysis. He concluded that the skull was not that of an Indian. Since then, stories have circulated for well over 200 years of Europeans that settled in the Americas 3 centuries before Christopher Columbus. The theory is that these Europeans were the white Indians that were mentioned in Native American stories. However, with the mighty waves and floods of the Ohio River, Sand Island has been swept of its sinister evidence, forever concealing the very dark things that happened here. The state of Virginia refused to pay Clark for the money he borrowed to finance his military campaigns. They said they could not find receipts to support his claims. Because of this, he was chased by creditors for most of his adult life. However, Virginia did give Clark 150,000 acres for his military service, known as Clark's Grant. But he was land poor and had no money to develop it. Little by little, he lost every piece of his land grant each time a creditor found him and made a claim. He was left with only a small piece of property for his cabin, a grist mill, and his memories. He ended up an old man that never married, virtually penniless, and whom drank heavily. In 1809, he suffered a stroke and fell into the fireplace. His right leg was so badly burned that it had to be amputated. For the rest of his life, he lived in Louisville with his sister Lucy and her husband at Locust Grove. He not only lost his land, but his fierce independence. Virginia eventually gave General Clark a pension of $400 a year and a ceremonial sword. The pension was equivalent to under $9,000 in today's money, a very paltry sum for saving his country from the British. General Clark died in 1818 after a series of strokes. He was first buried at Locust Grove, but later moved to a tiny plot at Cave Hill Cemetery in Louisville. It certainly wasn't the grand memorial that he deserved. The man that was called the conqueror of the old Northwest Territory. Ironically, just a few years after his death, Virginia found his wartime receipts and paid his estate a partial payment of $30,000. That's over $720,000 in today's money. These payments continued for 93 years until 1913. In 2021, an arsonist set fire to the Clark cabin. And now, only the chimney remains. A final insult to the man that gave everything for America and spent the rest of his life paying for it. However, if you visit Vincennes, Indiana, justice has been served. Starting with a visitor center dedicated to George Rogers Clark. Inside are both exhibits and an excellent film to honor this true patriot. And along the Wabash River stands an impressive memorial fit for a hero. It acts as a shrine for a statue of General Clark and has murals depicting his amazing achievements, which were many. A historical marker at the Clark cabin states that this is where William Clark, Meriwether Lewis, and the Corps of Discovery started their massive survey of Western America. Just west of the Clark cabin parking lot is the Lewis and Clark Park. You'll find a keelboat where the kids can play. There are millstones that were used to mill corn and wheat. Information kiosks detail the Lewis and Clark expedition. And the Ohio River Greenway Trail continues miles onto New Albany and to even more discoveries. Like the Lewis and Clark expedition, Clarksville is only the start of many great things ahead.